It's just garbage, Earl. Old paper and a busted clock. Leave it for the truck.
It's just garbage, Earl. Old paper and a busted clock. Leave it for the truck. That's what the man married to his daughter said to him, standing in a driveway in the heat, while a 79-year-old Marine knelt on the concrete with a black trash bag torn open across his knees. Brad Cooper said it the way you say something to a child who's slowing you down. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't soften it. He just wanted the old man out of the way so the movers could finish, and he figured the fastest path to that was to tell Earl Hadley that the only thing left of his life that nobody had bothered to keep was, in fact, nothing at all. If you've ever watched someone hand you your own history and call it trash, type Semper Fi in the comments, because this is a story about what a man carries when nobody around him knows the weight of it, and what happens on the day the weight finally gets answered for. Earl Hadley was not a large man anymore. He had been once. There were photographs, if anyone had ever gone looking, of a kid from Marion, Ohio, with shoulders that filled a doorway and a jaw set like he was daring the world to try him. But the world had tried him, and the years had done their slow arithmetic, and the man kneeling on his daughter's driveway in May of 2026 was thin through the chest, careful on his feet, and quiet in the particular way that men who have seen too much become quiet. He wore a windbreaker the colour of dishwater and a VFW cap so faded the gold thread had gone the colour of wheat. He drove a 2009 Buick with a cracked taillight he fixed every spring with red tape. He lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment off Route 23 since his wife Margaret passed, and he visited his daughter Diane the third Sunday of every month, because that was the arrangement, and Earl Hadley was a man who kept arrangements even when nobody noticed he kept them. That third Sunday the house was in boxes. The house. Diane and Brad were moving to a bigger place across the county line, a place with a pool and a finished basement and a kitchen Brad liked to talk about. Earl had offered to help. Diane had told him, kindly enough, that he should just sit on the porch and stay out of the sun, and he had done that for almost an hour, hands folded watching strangers in matching shirts carry his daughter's life out the front door. Then he had walked around the side of the house to use the bathroom, and on his way back he had seen the curb. There were maybe a dozen bags out by the road, lawn clippings, broken hangers, the guts of a garage that gets emptied when people move and decide they've been keeping too much for too long. And in the third bag from the mailbox, where the plastic had split against the corner of something, Earl saw a flap of water-stained cardboard and a single line of handwriting he would have known in the dark underwater. 50 years from the grave, Margaret's handwriting. Block letters, the way she addressed everything because she said her cursive embarrassed her. Earl, do not throw away. He didn't say anything at first. That was the thing people would remember later, the ones who were there. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse anybody. He walked down the driveway the way he walked everywhere now, deliberate. One hand a little out from his side for balance, and he knelt down on the concrete, which is not a small thing to ask a 79-year-old body to do, and he opened the bag with his fingers because he wasn't going to wait for scissors. That was when Brad came out and told him it was garbage. Earl didn't look up. He lifted the box out of the bag and set it on the driveway and started taking things out of it one at a time, and he laid each thing down on the warm concrete with the care of a man diffusing something. A stack of utility bills from 1981 rubber-banded the rubber turned to dust. A clock with a cracked face that had stopped at time that meant nothing to anyone living. A church bulletin. A Father's Day card a child had made out of construction paper and dried glue. And underneath all of it, flat at the bottom where Margaret had put it, because Margaret always put the things that mattered at the bottom, where the world couldn't get to them first. A manila envelope soft as cloth from age, and inside the envelope 3 things. A folded flag, the triangle of it gone slightly grey, the cotton stars worn smooth. A photograph of 2 young Marines, one of them unmistakably Earl, the other a boy with a gap in his teeth and his arms slung around Earl's neck. Both of them filthy, both of them grinning like the camera had caught them in the 1 second of a very bad year when something was funny. And a citation, on paper that had yellowed but not torn, with an eagle at the top and language in the cold formal stack the military uses when it is trying to say something it cannot otherwise say. The Silver Star. Awarded to Corporal Earl T. Hadley, United States Marine Corps, for conspicuous gallantry, the city of Huber, February 1968. Diane came out onto the porch with a roll of packing tape in her hand, and saw her father kneeling in the driveway over a torn trash bag, and her first reaction, and she would carry this the rest of her life, was irritation. "Dad, "What are you doing? That's the donate pile. Leave it." And then Brad, helpfully, "I already told him. It's just old junk. The truck comes at 4. Neither of them had walked close enough to see what was in his hands. That is the whole story, really, in one sentence. For 58 years, nobody in that family had walked close enough to see what was in his hands. There was a young man on the moving crew named Marcus, 26, broad, quiet, a Marine Corps Eagle globe and anchor tattooed on his right forearm under the sleeve. He had served 1 enlistment, gotten out, taken the moving job because the moving job was hiring. He was carrying a dresser down the front steps when he saw the old man on the driveway and saw, even from 40 feet, the particular triangle of a folded flag and the particular yellow of a citation, and Marcus set the dresser down on the lawn very gently, and walked over and did not say anything dismissive at all. He crouched next to Earl. He looked at the paper, and then this 26-year-old kid in a moving company polo took his ball cap off his head in a stranger's driveway in the middle of a working Sunday, and Brad looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Sir," Marcus said, "is that yours?" Earl looked at him for the first time. "It was a long time ago," he said, which is the thing men like Earl say. Not yes, not no. "It was a long time ago," said in a voice that has folded the whole thing up small enough to carry, and would prefer you didn't ask him to unfold it on a driveway in front of his daughter. "Hugh City," Marcus said, reading. "1st Battalion, 5th Marines." 2-5, actually, Earl said. "We got attached around. It was a confused time." And that was the most Earl Hadley had said about the war in front of his daughter, in her entire adult life, and she was standing 8 feet away holding packing tape, hearing her father correct a stranger about a battalion she had never once heard him name. Here is what nobody in that driveway knew, because Earl had never told them, because the men who do the thing almost never tell the people the thing was for. In late January of 1968, the city of Hue erupted. The Tet Offensive came down on South Vietnam all at once, and the old imperial capital, with its stone walls and its narrow streets and its citadel, became some of the worst block-to-block fighting American Marines had seen since the Pacific. Men cleared rooms with grenades and rifles a yard at a time. The casualty rate in those streets was savage. And on the 4th of February, a rifle squad got pinned in a walled courtyard near the Phu Cam Canal, and 4 men went down in the open, and the corpsman who tried to reach them went down too. And a 20-year-old corporal named Earl Hadley made a decision that no order required him to make, and that no one would have blamed him for not making. He went out 4 times. The citation, in its flat language, says he traversed open ground under sustained automatic weapons and rocket fire, that he personally carried or dragged 4 wounded Marines and 1 Navy corpsman to a covered position, that he was wounded by fragmentation on the 3rd trip and continued, that on the 4th trip the man he recovered was a 19-year-old rifleman from Galveston, Texas, named Thomas Renner, who had a sucking chest wound and 11 minutes of life left in him, by the estimate of the doctors who later put him back together, and that Corporal Hadley got him to the corpsman with perhaps 4 of those 11 minutes to spare. The photograph in the box, the 2 boys grinning, was taken 6 weeks before that day, when nothing was funny but they laughed anyway because that is what 19 and 20 do to survive. Thomas Renner lived. He went home to Galveston with a scar that wrapped his ribcage like a hand, and a story he told exactly once a year, every 4th of February for the rest of his life, to his children and then to his grandchildren, the story of a corporal he barely knew who came back into the open a 4th time after the math said don't. He named his first son for himself, and he raised that son on the story, and that son grew up and put on the same uniform and stayed in it and rose in it. Diane was the one who, not knowing what else to do with the strange electricity in her own driveway, walked back inside and called her cousin, who had married a man who was something in the reserves, to ask, half embarrassed, whether a Silver Star citation was the kind of thing you were supposed to be able to just throw away. That phone call travelled. It travelled the way these things travel, person to person, each one a little more upright than the last, until late that afternoon, with the donation truck genuinely due, a dark government sedan came down the residential street and parked at an angle that said it was not concerned with parking, and a man got out in the service uniform of the United States Marine Corps with a Brigadier General's star on each shoulder, and he did not walk toward the house. He walked toward the old man sitting on the porch step with a cardboard box on his knees. The mover stopped moving. Brad, who had spent the day deciding what in this family was worth keeping, stood very still by the garage with a lamp in his hands. The General crossed the lawn and stopped in front of Earl Hadley and the General's voice, When it came, was not a general's voice at all. It cracked in the middle of the first word. Corporal Hadley. He came to attention on a suburban lawn and he saluted a man in a dishwater windbreaker and he held it. My father was Thomas Renner, Pookham Canal, February 4th, 1968. He had to stop. He started again. I have heard your name at every Christmas and every 4th of February of my entire life, sir. My father passed in 2019. He asked us to find you. We could not find you. We looked for 6 years. His eyes were wet and he did not pretend they weren't. Sir, I have 3 children who know what you did before they knew their multiplication tables. You are the reason every single one of them exists. Nobody on that driveway moved. Diane had her hand over her mouth. Marcus the mover was standing at attention without being told to, the way the body remembers, and Brad Cooper, who had said it's just garbage, who had said leave it for the truck, set the lamp down on the grass very, very carefully, like it had become something he was afraid of breaking. Earl stood up. It took him a moment, the way it took him a moment now to do everything, and the general did not reach to help him because the general understood that this was a man who would stand up on his own. Earl returned the salute. His hand was not entirely steady, but the shape of it was perfect. The angle of it was perfect. 58 years had not touched the angle of it. He was a good Marine, Earl said. Renner. He kept asking me about his mother, out there in the courtyard. He kept apologizing for being heavy. And then the old man's face did something it had not done in front of his family in their lifetimes. It came apart, briefly, and folded itself back. Tell your children, he said, that he wasn't heavy. They did not throw the box away. The general had a flag case made and the citation framed under museum glass, and he drove 4 hours the following month to hang it himself on the wall of a 1-bedroom apartment off Route 23, so that the man who earned it would not have to stand on a chair to do it. Diane keeps the photograph now, the 2 grinning boys, on the mantel of the house with the pool, where she has to walk past it every day, which is, she has said, the point of keeping it there. Brad does not talk much about that Sunday, but the following Veterans Day he drove to the apartment off Route 23 without being asked, and he stood in the doorway and he said the only thing he had ever needed to say, which was that he was sorry and that he had not known, and Earl Hadley, who kept arrangements, made room for him at the small table and poured him a cup of coffee and let it go, because the last thing a man like that wants is for the weight to land on anybody else. He still drives the Buick. He still fixes the taillight every spring with red tape. He's still careful on his feet and quiet in the way that men who have carried other men become quiet. But there is a flag on his wall now, and a photograph of a boy from Galveston who was not heavy, and once a year on the 4th of February the phone rings and it is a brigadier general's children, grown now, calling an old Marine in Ohio to say the only thing that ever needed saying, which is thank you, and we know, and we will never not know. If you believe the people who quietly carry the rest of us deserve to be recognized before they're gone, and not after, type Semper Fi in the comments, share this with one person who needs to hear it today, and subscribe, because on this channel we make sure the box never makes it to the truck. Not on our watch, not ever again.